So thank you for joining us on Monday Night Travel. It's become a ritual for me. I mean, you know, there's so much sort of complexity and anxiety out there. And once a week, I like to just think about travel. And this is our chance. In a normal year, I'm out traveling in Europe 100 days. I come home. When I come home, I'm flying off somewhere every weekend to give a talk. I haven't been able to do that for a whole year. So this is my chance to just enthuse about Europe, and I'm loving it. And I'm just so thankful that we can be cozy together. I feel like in little ways, I'm coming into your living room, and in little ways, you're coming into my living room. Please make yourself at home. Every Monday, this is it. I've got some great Italian wine. This is our second show, so I'm just pacing myself. Let's put it that way. But this is Vino Nobile di Montepulciano, and this is kind of the poor man's Brunello di Montalcino. I really like this. It's the same grape, Sangiovese. It's made 25 miles south of Siena in Tuscany, in a little town called Montepulciano. And this is Contucci. I know the Contucci family. That's a cool thing about Italy. You meet the family, and for generations, they've been loving this wine and sharing it. It has to age for 1 year in a big oak cask. Let me just check it. Oh, that's been a year in an oak cask. Yeah, right. And there's a wonderful man named Adamo, and he takes you down into the cellar and he pulls out a little cork out of the big 500-liter oak thing, and it squirts wine into there. Yeah, and it's good. It is really good. So I'm going to be drinking that, and I hope you're going to be happily sipping on whatever you like. And then I made a little spread for myself tonight. This is bruschetta, and one of the great things about Italy is bruschetta. One of the bad things about going to Italy is once you come back to the United States, you can never have bruschetta quite the same. You get spoiled, but you can have good bruschetta nevertheless. And let me just give you a little tour of my dinner here, because I never realized that this was going to morph into some idiot savant sharing his cooking tips, but I'm enjoying it and I'm learning a lot as I go. You need a rustic bread, a crusty bread, and you toast it. And then you take a garlic clove, a raw garlic clove, and you rub it on it. And I've had friends in Italy do that, and it seems like magical. I've been doing it all afternoon. It's easy. Anybody can do it. And you rub the garlic on there. You drizzle it with some great olive oil. And then anything that you think goes together, I mean, if you can dream it up in an omelet or in a pizza, you can put it on this bread and call it bruschetta. And I started off with the classic, which is olive oil and salt and pepper and on the toast. And then I thought, no, let's amp it up a bit. So we got some basil, we got some tomatoes, and we got this beautiful cheese I was talking about, the Parmigiano Reggiano. This is mozzarella. I'm a sucker for mozzarella and anchovies. And I'm sort of evangelical about anchovies because Americans say, hold the anchovies. Go to Italy, you'll fall in love with anchovies. And then I thought it needed a little color, so I put a couple of cherry tomatoes on there. Tapenade is a nice thing. If you've never had tapenade, try it out. In my grocery store, they only had green olive tapenade. I suppose it was okay, but I wanted to make it black olive, so I chopped up some olives and mixed it in there. We can do that. So you got your olive oil, you got your garlic, and you got your tapenade. And then over here is kind of dessert. Rather than the olive oil and everything, we've got sheep cheese, walnuts, and honey, drizzled with honey. So that's what I've got. And I'm going to be munching on that all night, along with my cheese candy here. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And I'm going to be sipping on my wine. And you can't eat alone. So I've invited, all the way from Rome, my good friend Francesca Caruso to join us. Francesca, are you there?
Buonasera, Rick. Ciao, everyone. It's lovely to meet you for an evening in Rome. I'm very happy to be here.
Ciao, Francesca. And I bet, well, first of all, you are one of my favorite guides. And I've got a lot of guides I just love and respect so much. And a extra little advantage a guide have, I think, is if they have 1 foot in our culture and 1 foot in the European culture. You know, you could be the greatest scholar on Italy, but if you don't know American culture, you can't really connect and relate. Or you could be the greatest leader and everything in America, but if you don't know Italian culture, how can you teach it? The best guides I know are sort of bicultural. What's your story? Because you're so good at sharing Rome, which is an overwhelming city to a lot of people.
Thank you, Rick. I was born in Rome, so I like to think of myself as the genuine article. I lived there all my life. But my mother is American. She moved to Italy before I was born, and she raised me speaking English. So grazie, mamma, forever for that. But also, I grew up with her mentality. So inside and outside the Italian culture, it was extremely helpful.
Thank you all for joining us. and remind you that we'll be cutting in and popping questions on Francesca, and we'll be answering your questions later on. And we're going to be drinking our fizzy water and our red wine and munching on our bruschetta and having a party like we do every Monday night. So thank you so much for joining us. And now I'm going to go to our playlist that we just mentioned. And I think we're going to be right there in Rome, and we're going to learn all about it. Here we go. In a nutshell, classical Rome lasted about 1,000 years, roughly 500 BC to 500 AD. Rome grew for 500 years, peaked for 200 years, and fell for 300 years. The first half was the Republic, ruled by elected senators. The last half was the Empire, ruled by unelected emperors.
In its glory days, the word Rome meant not just the city, but what Romans considered the entire civilized world.
Everyone was either Roman or barbarian. People who spoke Latin or Greek were considered civilized, part of the empire. Everyone else, barbarian. Francesca, I just got to interrupt here. Barbarian. We call, people were Roman citizens, or if they were not in the Roman Empire, outside of the empire, not speaking Greek or Roman, they called them barbarian. I can never sort through all these little stories that tour guides like to tell and share, but I've heard that to the Roman ear, the people outside of the empire sounded like animals. They just sounded bar. So they called them barbarians. Is there anything to that?
Well, the word barbarian is actually Greek. To the Greeks, all foreign languages that they couldn't understand sounded like brr, brr, brr. And so that's where the word comes from and what it means. I think that for the Romans, we can make a basic distinction between the Mediterranean and Europe. When the Romans start expanding in the Mediterranean, they come into contact with civilizations that are far more sophisticated than their own and have been there for a while. And it's true that they're brutal in their conquest of them, but they recognize its sophistication, and they would never, for instance, refer to the Greeks as barbarians. It's a little bit different with Europe. The Romans feel far superior to the Celtic and Germanic tribes that they conquer there, and they made no bones about it. This probably also has something to do with the fact that those territories didn't have a highly developed agriculture and a city culture that for the Romans is a sign of high distinction and great civilization.
It is interesting to think that the torch of civilization would pass, Western civilization, of course, from Egypt to Crete, to Mycenae, to Athens, to Rome, and then later to Paris, London, and who knows where, if it's going to continue west. But at that point, civilization had come from the east and it's in Rome. So Germany and England and Spain, they would have still been barbarians. Okay.
According to legend, Rome was founded by two brothers, Romulus and Remus. Abandoned in the wild and suckled by a she-wolf, they grew up to establish the city. In actuality, the first Romans mixed and mingled here, in the valley between the famous 7 hills of Rome. This became the Roman Forum.
In 509, they tossed out their king and established the relatively democratic Roman Republic. That began perhaps history's greatest success story, the rise of Rome.
From the start, Romans were expert builders, and they had a knack for effective government. This simple brick building was once richly veneered with marble and fronted by a grand portico. It's the Curia. The Senate met here and set the legal standards that still guide Western civilization.
So let's just stop here for a second. Francesca, you know, if you think about Rome, you think it's a bunch of big marble blocks stacked on top of each other, but really, most of that marble was just a veneer, wasn't it? And Romans invented concrete, and that made things possible. Tell us, use the front of this Senate building as a lesson in the bones of Roman building.
Yeah, it's actually a perfect place to see it. So this brick wall that you see, the brick that you see is just a facing. So a Roman wall is like a sandwich. It has a concrete core, faced with brick, and then over the brick you have a veneer of either marble or plaster. So here, let's imagine it covered up to halfway to the top where you see the windows with a marble veneer, and then the upper half covered with plaster painted to look like marble. And where you see those large holes, imagine a roof projecting out supported by columns. So this is simply the skeleton that we're looking at now.
Okay, but it wasn't really a sandwich, it was a bruschetta.
Of course.
Because I mean, you got the concrete, then you got the bricks, and then you got all the tasty stuff on the front. But really, most of it is bread, concrete. All right.
The reign of Julius Caesar, who ruled around the time of Christ, marked the turning point between the Republic and the Empire. The Republic, designed to rule a small city-state, found itself trying to rule most of Europe. Something new and stronger was needed. Caesar established a no-nonsense, more disciplined government, became dictator for life, and for good measure, had a month named in his honor, July.
Julius Caesar. That's where we get the word July. How do you follow that?
By being his great nephew, being called Augustus, and naming the next month after yourself. So August from Augustus.
So
that's how you do it.
So Julius Caesar, July, Caesar Augustus, August, and then Septimius Severus, September.
So, well, if only.
Octavian, October.
You would have
No?
made a perfect ancient Roman.
Okay, but July and August, named after Roman emperors. Egomaniacs, egomaniacs.
The powerful elites of the Republic found all this change just too radical. In an attempt to save the Republic and their political power, a faction of Roman senators assassinated Caesar. His body was burned on this spot in 44 BC. The citizens of Rome gathered here in the heart of the Forum to hear Mark Antony say, in Shakespeare's words, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I've come to bury Caesar, not to praise him." But the Republic was finished, and Rome became the grand capital of a grand empire. The Via Sacra, or Sacred Way, was the main street of ancient Rome. It stretched from the Arch of Septimius Severus to the Arch of Titus. Rome's various triumphal arches, named after the emperors who built them, functioned as public relations tools. Reliefs decorating the various arches show how war and expansion were the business of state. Rome's thriving economy was fueled by plunder and slaves won in distant wars. Ancient Rome had a population of over 1 million at its peak, and anywhere you dig in the modern city, you'll find remains of the ancient one.
But if you dig here, you're going to find cats too, aren't you, Francesca?
Yes, this is where the cat sanctuary, one of Rome's many cat sanctuaries, and cats and ruins are just perfect together.
So this is a big fancy square, noisy, Largo Argentina. And people stand here and they look down there and they're looking at some of the oldest ruins in Rome. These are centuries older than the stuff we see on the Forum, I think, much of it. And they're looking for cats. They're not even noticing the ancient Roman architecture. Are there still cats there?
Yes, the sanctuary is still there. A friend of mine adopted a kitty from there just a few days ago.
So you can check out the cats in Rome. There's a lot of cats in Rome.
Largo Argentina is a modern transportation hub with traffic roaring all around some of Rome's oldest temples. The Capitoline Hill, which rises majestically from the busy streets, has long been the home of Rome's city government. During the Renaissance, Michelangelo designed this regal staircase. He gave the square its famously harmonious proportions and its majestic centerpiece, an ancient statue of Emperor Marcus Aurelius. This is a copy. The 2nd century original, the greatest equestrian statue of antiquity, is showcased in the adjacent Capitoline Museum. This, like the other great statues of antiquity, is now safely out of the elements.
I remember, Francesca, when I was first going to Rome, this precious original was out in the square.
Yes, it was. But then they decided, of course, it was pollution and pigeons. It was just not possible. Preservation is a very important issue. Think of how many of Rome's treasures are outside, exposed to pollution and the elements. So it's important to keep this inside. It's very well displayed, well worth a visit.
There are a few little nubs of what was once elegant statues that have for some reason been left out, and they've just been eroded away by the weather and the acidic quality of the air, I think. Thank goodness they brought in the treasures, eh?
Yes.
And you got to make a point to go inside to see them. This is in one of the greatest museums in Rome, right on top of Capitol Hill, the Capitoline Museum.
The museum helps you imagine life before the fall of Rome. These reliefs show Marcus Aurelius performing the various duties of an emperor. Here, as the chief priest or Pontifex Maximus, he prepares to sacrifice a bull. Here on the battle.
Wait a minute. Did he call himself the Pontifex Maximus?
Pontifex Maximus is the highest ranking priest in the pagan religion. It means a great bridge builder, but I know what you're thinking. It's also what the popes call themselves. They get it from them because they are the highest ranking priests in Christianity, and they too are great bridge builders. That's what the word means, because they build bridges between heaven and earth.
Okay, so 2,000 years ago, the leader of Rome was the Pontifex Maximus, and then you got this leader of the Christian church, and he just decided to call himself the Pontifex Maximus also. How do you say? You say chin chin?
Chin chin, salute.
Salute.
Either
so
one. Either one. Yeah,
salute is that I salute you?
It's actually good health. It's to your good health.
Yeah, because I was going to say santé would be French. That would be to your health. And I don't know what they do in German. They don't, but salute is to your health, or just chin chin. Here you go.
He grants clemency to vanquished barbarian leaders. And this one puts you curbside at a victory parade with the emperor, the Eisenhower of his day, on a chariot, winged victory on his shoulder, and trumpets proclaiming his glory. The art of imperial Rome almost always carried a message. This dying Gaul, a Roman copy of a Greek original, was part of a monument celebrating another victory over the barbarians. Like any propaganda art, battle scenes stoked imperial pride. You can wander among heroic statues in grand halls and look into the eyes of long-forgotten emperors. And the museum also shows a more peaceful and intimate side of Roman life. Here, a boy quietly pulls a thorn from his foot. At first glance, these look like paintings, but they're actually micro-mosaics made of thousands of tiny chips. This mosaic hung in Emperor Hadrian's villa.
Romans emulated the high culture of the Greeks, and when it came to capturing beauty, their forte was making excellent copies of Greek originals.
The Capitoline Venus is one of the truest representations of the concept of feminine beauty from ancient times. Like so many classical statues, this is a 2,000-year-old Roman copy of a 2,500-year-old Greek original.
So, Francesca, I'd like to just take a pause here. And first of all, I've got to say that museum we're just in is a magnificent museum. Isn't it a shame a lot of people go to the Colosseum, they go to the Forum, they go to the Pantheon, and they walk right by the Capitoline museums?
Well, I'm sure that a lot of people don't have enough time, but I think even spending an hour strolling through the halls of the Capitoline museums that have an incredible collection of ancient Roman art. And it's worth it to see it, because outside in the Forum, you see the buildings, the ruins of the buildings, but then seeing the art in the museum allows you to integrate the ruins with what's actually there in its heyday. What we see in the Forum doesn't really help us understand what the city looked like 2,000 years ago.
You know, even as a kid, when I was teaching back in the 20s, it occurred to me a big risk for the American going to, going to Rome is you get overwhelmed by the magnificence of the outdoor sites, and you forget to go inside to one of the great galleries. And you got the Palazzo Massimo, of course, by the train station, and you've got the wonderful museum on the Capitoline Hill. But all that we were just walking through, it can be really crowded out at the Colosseum. And it can be quite comfortable and quite relaxed, and you're just surrounded by this exquisite beauty. When I'm looking at all of those statues and those faces, so realistic, I'm wondering about Rome as it expanded. What was it like to be conquered by the Romans? Talk about assimilation, talk about Romanization, because Rome must have done something right to create an empire that was as big as really the civilized West, all ruled from that one city. What was their modus operandi, their trick?
Well, that's a really great question. We have to always remember that Roman conquest is brutal, and it comes with the demand of absolute obedience. But then the thing is, how do you keep it for so long? Because one thing is conquering, another thing is maintaining an area that goes from Britain to the Middle East for so long. And one of the reasons they're so successful is assimilation. So if you are conquered by the Romans, if you don't rebel, if you pay your taxes, if you pay your regard to the emperor, you can continue speaking your language, you can worship your own gods, you can follow your own customs. And the reason this is possible is also the fact that the Romans don't have the concept of racial supremacy. The Latin language does not have the word for race, and the Romans are not the fascists of the ancient world.
I was just thinking that, you know, Hitler and Franco, they didn't have that magnanimous approach to empire. They said, you got to speak our language. You can't have your culture. The Romans were a little more, I think, pragmatic about it.
I think pragmatic more than kind, I would say. But the Romans, you are making a very important point, because the Romans prided themselves from day one in being a mixture of people who came from all over. The big division in the Roman world is between the free and the unfree. It has nothing to do with race.
And that could be in any of the Roman societies. Talk about a little bit about the geographical key to Roman success, because when you look at the expanse of the Roman Empire at the Pax Romana's peak, when the word Rome meant not just the city, but the entire, what they considered the civilized world, right smack dab in the middle of the Italian peninsula, in the middle of the Mediterranean, in the middle of all that land they controlled, north and south of the Mediterranean, you've got the city of Rome. The centrality of that, did that contribute to the effectiveness of their ability to rule?
Yes, the Romans were convinced that geography made their destiny. Think of the shape and the position of Italy, like a boot, now that projects into the center of the Mediterranean. So connections, commerce, exchanges with all these other civilizations. We mentioned the Greeks, the Egyptians, and many others. And then think of Rome, that is at the center of the central area in the Mediterranean. And Rome is on a river. How many cities do we know that are founded on rivers? It's far enough inland that protection is possible, but close enough to the sea that commerce and communication are possible. So really, they were convinced that geography had a lot to do with it, that they were sort of blessed in a sense geographically.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to think about. And then when we travel, we see the physical remnants of the Roman Empire all around. I mean, you see it in North Africa, you see it in Turkey, you see it in Northern England. Their architecture, their art, their tangible infrastructure, it was sort of like, it seems to me it was a kind of propaganda or media that just let everybody know all the time, everywhere they went, you're part of Rome.
That's very important. The Romans use art and architecture for communication, propaganda, and Romanization. Think of what it must have meant to rule over such a vast territory in which, for instance, it took 55 days for the news of the death of an emperor to reach every corner of their world, a world that didn't have the radio, television, the internet. So how can they make their presence felt? They build. So they build on a gigantic scale that's designed for intimidation. They bring baths, amphitheaters, these very Roman buildings that speak of Roman life to every city they conquer or build. They fill them with art that tells the story that the way they want to tell it. And then also think about it, as you said, wherever you were in the empire, you would see a stretch of road, you would see the arches of an aqueduct. So everything said Rome is, and there's
You'd
no
have a
life outside of it.
You'd have sort of the basics of a city. I mean, you'd have a Colosseum, you'd have you'd have a theater, you know, you would have your road system. It's fascinating. The more we learn, the more we appreciate our sightseeing. Okay, now, Francesca, we are going to, we're going out to Ostia, and you're going to take me there on public transit. Set up Ostia, how easy it is to get out there for sightseeing in Rome, and why would you, I mean, you seem to really enjoy taking the people to Ostia. Why is it worth a day of our vacation?
I love Ostia. Ostia is a 30-minute, €1.50 train ride away from the center of Rome, and it's a former port town. And I enjoy going there because in Rome, I never get the chance to talk about the daily life of the ancient Romans, how they lived, how they slept, what they ate, how they worked. And in Ostia, it's a town, a little bit like Pompeii. It's a town, so you really get a chance to talk about how they lived. It's so easy to get to,
And
and it's beautiful.
we got to remember the challenge of it, just the practicality. You got a city of 1 million people, you got to feed it, and it's got to have a port. I mean, here in Seattle, we've got the place where the containers are all stacked up, you know. Rome had that too, and it was called Ostia. Let's go.
Up with Francesca again, riding the subway out to Ostia Antica to explore what's left of ancient Rome's mighty port. The ruins of Ostia rival the more famous ruins at Pompeii. While Pompeii is 3 hours away, Ostia is just a half-hour train ride from downtown Rome. 2,000 years ago, this was a working port town. Wandering around, you can imagine the bustle and complexity of a once thriving port of 60,000 people. Warehouses, apartment flats, mansions, shopping arcades, all laid out in a typically Roman grid plan of streets. Located where the Tiber River meets the sea, Ostia was founded in the 4th century before Christ. It served as a naval base, protecting Rome from any invasion by river. It was also an administrative and warehousing center, keeping more than 1 million Romans fed and in sandals. But eventually things went downhill for Ostia. Rome fell, the river changed course. The port silted up and was abandoned. The entire place became a malaria-infested swamp, and Ostia was forgotten. The mud that buried Ostia actually protected it from the ravages of time, including stone-scavenging medieval peasants. And thanks to extensive and ongoing excavations, there's lots to see. This fine mosaic decorated the Baths of Neptune. At the bottom of the pool, Neptune rides 4 horses through the sea. Apart from the Cupid riding the dolphin, the sea looks pretty frightening, which, to those ancients, it was. The adjacent theater seated 4,000. Plays were rowdy daytime events with lots of audience participation, perhaps a bit like today's school field trip. Typical of Roman urban design, this complex mixed religion, business, and entertainment. A grand theater facing a temple surrounded by a commercial square. The Square of the Guilds, lined with offices of ship owners and traders, was the bustling center of Rome's import-export industry. Mosaics on the sidewalk advertised services offered by various shops, with symbols for sailors and merchants who were either illiterate or couldn't read Latin.
Francesca, I just love this sidewalk. I mean, people were, they spoke all different languages. It's a port, you know, with the sailors coming in from all corners. So you have the sign language saying what's for sale and so on. And I just think of the commotion, the cacophony of sound, the energy, the economy. What's a moment? Paint a little picture for us. What could be happening 2,000 years ago, the day you and I strolled down the sidewalk in Ostia?
Imagine a day that a shipment of elephants arrived for the Colosseum, or the day an Egyptian obelisk arrived, or maybe art from Greece, or maybe a shipment of spices, of wine or oil. It must have been wonderful. Imagine it full of people.
There you go. I mean, I've been going to Ostia ever since, literally since I was a kid. I went there when I was 18. I didn't have an appreciation of fine wine back then, I'll tell you that. It's worth spending a little more for a little better Sangiovese. But I've never even thought about that. You got a shipment of elephants coming in for the Colosseum. You've got an obelisk coming in from Egypt. Imagine quarrying an obelisk. They were all cut down in Aswan at the far south end of the Nile. And they shipped it all the way up to Alexandria, stick it on a trans-Mediterranean boat and row it across the Mediterranean. It gets to Ostia. And here it is, big news. You got these great Greek statues. I mean, Romans loved Greek statues, but there weren't enough Greek statues to go around for all the rich Romans. So all of these nouveau riche Romans would get copies of Greek originals, but the Greek originals had to come here. It's mind-blowing to think of what they were able to do 2,000 years ago, and we can visit it when we're in Rome.
Shippers showed off fine vessels. This lighthouse was the sign of the great Egyptian city of Alexandria. Grain containers are reminders that grain was the major import of Ostia.
Rome imported most of what it consumed. These big jars contained oil, wine, grain that came from all over the Mediterranean, was stored here and then shipped off to Rome. This is the mill. Ostia was famous for the quality of its bread. They would put sticks through these holes, and then a donkey or a human would push them around.
Okay, so you'd pour the grain in here, grind it up.
Yes.
Flour comes out the bottom.
Yes.
Now that's stone brown, I'd say.
Isn't it really?
I love to imagine how people must have lived here.
Yes, in apartments that could be easily up to 5 stories high. They had no kitchens, no plumbing, no heating, so they used these apartments like tents at a camping site just to sleep.
No kitchens.
No kitchens, so even to eat, they would have to go to a fast food or a cafeteria. At the time, it was just across the street.
So you just step across the street to the corner diner.
Yes.
2,000 years ago, this was the neighborhood bar.
Yes, like a cafeteria or a fast food place.
Amazing.
You would come up to the counter and maybe order something to go. Maybe you might see some food or some drinks on display here. Or if you had time, you would come inside and you could have something sitting down. And here, probably they had a display of the food or maybe the cups and the plates. And then here there's a pictorial menu that shows us what was offered.
So do you think they could have had bread, and they could have had honey, and they could have had cheese and walnuts, Francesca?
Probably not combined with the walnuts, but yes, these are all fundamental elements in Roman nutrition. Certainly bread and olive oil. I mean, what's more Roman than that? Now a glass of wine. That was really the basic meal of a lot of people in in ancient Rome.
Elemental. I like that. Elemental. Bread, olive oil, cheese, wine. 2,000 years, it's still elemental. And you can go to a little cafeteria here and look at the menu on the wall.
So we have food, we have drinks, and we have music.
So music, on like Tuesday night we got live music out in the courtyard.
Yes, why not? As you can see, public restrooms are really public and quite advanced. They had running water coming.
Wait a minute. This is the limit. You mean everybody's sitting at the same time on in these toilets?
Oh, the Romans are very social.
Well, you told me once they have no word for privacy, right?
No, they don't. And I guess this is evidence.
So we've become a little more private since then, but at least they had public facilities and flushing, basically flushing toilets.
Through.
So there's a stream going all the time, constantly flushing.
Constantly flushing, so constantly clean. Imagine frescoes on the walls and even revolving doors at the entrance.
So easy to underestimate how advanced Rome was.
That's really true.
Ostia's delightful little museum helps bring life to these ruins. These fine statues, tangled wrestlers, kissing cupids, playful gods, adorned the courtyards of wealthy Ostia families. Many of the statues are 2nd and 3rd century Roman copies, inspired by famous but now lost Greek originals.
You know, I'd like to bust in here and remind our travelers, you go to a great site, don't skip the little museum, because all of the precious architectural finds will be taken in out of the acidic air and put in the museum. And this is a nondescript little house on the site, and I would imagine a lot of people don't give it much importance, but this is where you will find the great art that didn't go to the major capital museum, right on the site. All over the ancient world, when you go to a site, Greek or ancient Roman, be sure you step into the museum. It's included in the ticket, and then you'll see the art treasures from that excavation.
These portrait busts are of real people, like those you'd meet on the streets right here 1,800 years ago. One thing Roman artists did well was carve realistic busts. It was their forte because Roman religion revered ancestors, the man of the house, and his father and grandfather. That's why statues of Dad and Grandpa were often found in the corner of any proper house. Also, with the emperor considered a god, you'd find his bust in classrooms, at the post office, and all over town.
Okay, now we're going to step into another age, and we're going to see a lot of wonderful art that's put in the great churches of Rome. I do want to remind you, in a few minutes, we're going to be done with the program, and we're going to have some chance for Q&A. So be sure to ask your questions. Gabe will organize the questions, and we'll see if we can surprise Francesca with some fun questions. I will also want to remind you, as we go into this church section, Rome is layers, and it's overwhelming, but if you can see it in terms of layers, I think it makes it easier. And as we look at this Roman historic churches and art in situ, where it was designed to be, I want to remind you, a lot of the greatest art in Rome is free and it never has any crowds. It's sitting in the churches where the artists were commissioned to put it originally.
Rome is a city of magnificent art. It's everywhere you look, and most of it was paid for by the church. Public squares like Piazza Navona with Bernini's much-loved Four Rivers Fountain are decorated with church-sponsored art. Until modern times, it was the church that had the power, the money, and the need for great art. And going to church offered the masses, whose lives were so dreary otherwise, a promising glimpse of the glory that awaited them in the next life. And visiting today, our challenge is to appreciate the art from that perspective as a medieval worshiper. Popping into churches, many of them nondescript on the outside, you'll find sumptuous art treasures inside. The wonderful thing about seeing art in churches is that it's in situ, not hanging on museum walls, but exactly where the art was designed to be enjoyed. Thoughtfully stringing together a series of lesser-known churches can be an art lover's delight. For example, dropping by the relatively obscure Santa Maria Sopra Minerva, we find a glorious Gothic interior laden with impressive art. The altar sits upon the tomb of St. Catherine, with the ornate tombs of two Medici popes looking down. For generations, pilgrims have marveled at this Michelangelo statue of Christ carrying the cross. And in the side chapel is a lovely series of frescoes by Filippo Lippi, showing the good works of St. Thomas Aquinas, accompanied by a celestial serenade. Another even less visited church, Santa Prassede, is decorated with the best Byzantine mosaics in Rome. They date from the 800s. In this chapel, the gold ceiling represents heaven. An icon like Christ emerges from the background, supported by winged angels in white. Saints walk among patches of flowers, while Mary and Jesus overlook the altar. While this small chapel is impressive even to our modern eyes, in the darkness of medieval Rome, it was stunning, celebrated as the Garden of Paradise. Another gem awaiting those exploring Rome's back streets is the Church of St. Peter in Chains. Its fine side altar was sculpted during the Renaissance, an age when realism, emotion, even psychology were injected into the art. Its centerpiece is a masterpiece by Michelangelo. Michelangelo tells a story in marble. Moses has just returned from a meeting with God. He senses trouble back home. He turns to see his followers worshiping a golden calf. Gripping the 10 Commandments under his muscular arm, he's about to rise up and punish the naughty children of Israel.
Look at that. This is a Michelangelo statue in a little church, a 5-minute walk up the hill from the Colosseum. Here's a travel tip. You can't get into the Colosseum till a certain hour, I forget 9 or 10 o'clock, but you can get into the churches from 8 o'clock on, and there's no crowds there. So you could go a little, if you're an early person, go a little early and run up the hill and see Michelangelo's Moses in St. Peter in Chains. Francesca, think about Rome, how much great art there is in churches that's generally free and without crowds. You've got a couple of Michelangelos, we've already seen them, the Christ carrying the cross in Santa Maria Sopra Minerva and Moses in the St. Peter in Chains church. You've got the beautiful Bernini statue of St. Teresa in Ecstasy. You've got the Filippo Lippi we saw in the Santa Maria Sopra Minerva. Caravaggio paintings just hiding away in a church around the corner. What's a tip for seeing art in situ for free without crowds in Rome?
I think you can just weave, you can design a walk and just weave your way through the Roman streets from church to church. Just walk in, see a couple of paintings, walk out, and go on to the next one. And you can actually plan an entire day, an afternoon, or 1 hour just doing that. And just by contributing maybe a couple of euro to turn the lights on to see the paintings, you can have an incredible experience of art, as you say, in situ, where art was for the experience of prayer, not just for aesthetic contemplation.
You know, it's a beautiful thing to see the art where it was designed to be. A lot of travelers are upset when a church charges you to go into the church. But if you're going there as a sightseer and they want to charge you a few euros, you should really realize that's a very fair thing. If you were going there to worship, they certainly would not charge you. And as Francesca said, you could just pinpoint these around Rome and make an amazing walk just visiting art in churches. If you were a Christian in medieval Europe making your pilgrimage to Rome, you would walk all the way from Germany or wherever down the Via Francigena. What is it called?
Yes, Via Francigena, exactly.
The Via Francigena, and it would go to the Vatican, and you would come into Rome at the Piazza del Popolo. And today, when you get to the Piazza del Popolo, you see three streets that go out. And in the old days, they didn't have a good Rick Steves guidebook. They just had to know, you go to that dome, you go to that obelisk, and you turn right and so on. But it was all pinned on different churches with great relics. But even when you get to the Piazza del Popolo, that was the welcome to Rome. That's the first, the pilgrim would, that's the welcome to Rome. The pilgrim would finally be at the religious Oz, you know. And right there on your left, as you enter the square, there's a nondescript little church. You step inside and what do you see, Francesca?
You see Caravaggio, you see Raphael, you see Bernini. It's fantastic. It's like a museum in a church.
Caravaggio, Raphael, and Bernini in the place that was supposed to be seen, not hanging on a museum wall. It's amazing. And nobody does it. They're all waiting in line to go into the Colosseum. So remember, there's that extra dimension of Rome. And I don't know if it's just the wine, but I'm just getting really excited about the artistic appreciation options you have when you know what your options are in Rome. Okay, now we're going to go to the Gallery Borghese, and let's see. I'm so excited about this. I'm going to jump right ahead, and we're going to go right to the park where we have. There we go. This is the Gallery the Villa Borghese, the garden of the Borghese Gallery, where you can rent a bicycle and have a wonderful day just biking around the park. But the beautiful gem in the middle of it is the most sumptuous palace of a cardinal, back when cardinals were filthy rich. Set us up for this Villa Borghese, Francesca.
The Villa Borghese is a beautiful park, 148 acres of beautiful pines, as you can see. And in the middle of it is, for me, one of the most beautiful museums in the world. It's rather small, so it's doable. It's not one of these 9 miles like the Vatican, and it's very well organized because it's on reservation. They only allow a certain number of people in at a time, and there's the best of the best. It's used to be the private collection of a Roman cardinal, so it also reflects the taste of a specific family in the time.
And there's really no way to do it without having a reservation. Don't try to scam your way in. You need to make a reservation. You need to pay the price, and then you get 2 hours with just a couple hundred people in the whole place, and it is a quality experience. Let's go.
The Borghese Gardens, Rome's Central Park. Romans are proud of their generous green spaces. This sprawling park has long offered people here a place to relax, unwind, and let the kids run wild. The park's centerpiece is the Borghese Gallery. Once a cardinal's lavish mansion, today it welcomes the public. As is the case with many of Europe's top sites, admission requires a reservation. Getting one's easy. Just a quick phone call or visit the website, and you get an entry time. Good guidebooks have all the details. The wealthy Borghese family filled their 17th century villa with art. This was the age when the rich and powerful not only collected beautiful art, but actually employed leading artists to spiff up their homes. Cardinal Borghese was the Pope's nephew and one of the wealthiest people in Rome. With unlimited money, his palace dazzled with both fine art of the past, such as Raphael's exquisite Deposition, and with the best art of the day. Each room has a masterpiece at its center, like this intriguing look at Napoleon's sister, Pauline, by Canova. The polished marble is lifelike, even sensuous. Bernini's David is textbook Baroque. Bursting with life, David's body, wound like a spring and lips pursed as he prepares to slay the giant, shows the determination of the age. Bernini was just 25 when he sculpted this.
For the next 3 statues, look at the stone and imagine a 25-year-old carving it. I mean, think of the fleshy reality these artists get out of this marble. It's just to be there it's like a privilege.
And the face of David is his. Caravaggio tackled the same topic on canvas. Grabbing an opportunity to shock his viewers, the artist Caravaggio also sneaks in a self-portrait, this time as the head of Goliath. In keeping with the Baroque age, Bernini's Rape of Persephone packs an emotional punch. Persephone's entire body seems to scream for help as Pluto drags his catch into the underworld. His 3-headed dog howls triumphantly. Bernini's Apollo chasing Daphne is a highlight.
Oh, I just have to pour another glass whenever I see this piece of art. This could be my very favorite piece of art in all of Europe, Francesca. Can you tell us it really helps to, I'm hopeless when it comes to all the myths and so on. If you know the myth that the artist is trying to portray, it really does help. What's the story here? What are we going to see?
Oh, Rick, I'm really getting so teary looking at all these statues. I miss them so much. The story with
By the way,
Apollo.
we were there, Francesca, all alone when we were
Yeah.
filming. Do you remember that?
Oh,
It was one of the
yes.
most beautiful experiences. The guys were working really hard to film it, and you and I were just like, oh.
Yeah, it is glorious. But look what's happening here. So Apollo, the Greek god of music, of hunting, of poetry, has been struck by the arrow of love for young Daphne, who has struck by the other arrow. So she's not in love with him. And so the answer is no. He doesn't take that for an answer, and he starts chasing her, chasing her. She realizes that she doesn't stand a chance, and she calls out to her father, the river god, and implores for help. And he helps her by transforming her into a tree. Bernini captures that moment of transformation. Daphne is no longer a girl, but she's not a tree yet. She's caught in this moment in between, in marble. It has to be seen.
You just said something that just, I mean, honestly, it hit me. Daphne realizes she doesn't stand a chance. So she calls out for help. And here's what happens.
Apollo, happily wounded by Cupid's arrow, chases Daphne, who's saved by turning into a tree. In typical Baroque style, Bernini captures the instant when, just as Apollo's about to catch Daphne, her fingers turn to leaves. Her toes sprout roots, and Apollo's in for one rude surprise. The statue, as much air as stone, makes a supernatural event seem real. This classical scene, while plenty fleshy, comes with a church-pleasing moral. Chasing earthly pleasures leads only to frustration. The place to contemplate that thought is at the Vatican.
That's called a tortured transition. We have to do a lot of tortured transitions when we make our TV show, going from one fleshy scene to the Vatican. But I think we've had enough art and history. I think it's time now, Francesca, to go into maybe the most beloved neighborhood of Rome, on the other side of the river, on the wrong side of the tracks, river style. And let's go to Trastevere. Oh.
Rome was born about 3,000 years ago, here along the Tiber River. This was as far upstream as boats could sail, and the first place the river could be crossed by bridge. As a center of river trade, Rome connected the interior of the Italian peninsula with the Mediterranean. This riverbank would have been bustling in ancient times. Imagine busy docks, ramshackle boats, water mills, and platforms for fishing. Until modern times, Rome's river was part of its economy. Then, in the 1870s, in order to protect the city from flooding, the Romans walled off the Tiber. They built these tall, anonymous embankments that continue to isolate the river from the city to this day. While Rome was born on the Tiber, today the town seems to ignore its river. But the city's graceful bridges connect thriving neighborhoods. Just over the Tiber from here is one of Rome's most colorful districts. Trastevere is the place to immerse yourself in the crustier side of Rome. The name Trastevere actually means across the Tiber River.
I love this shot right here, Francesca. This is, I mean, there's countless streets in Trastevere like this. You're dodging the Vespas, you're peeking into little shops, you've got little kids on their tricycles, you've got old timers that brag they've never crossed the river. What is it about Trastevere that makes it unique? And what is your advice as a tour guide for a traveler who wants to experience it?
I think after a busy day exploring the main sites, the Colosseum and the Vatican museums, I would just go in the late afternoon on a stroll through Trastevere and think of having a meal there. The thing about Trastevere is that it helps us really experience that Rome is, yes, a big city, but it never lost its village dimension. This village dimension, more intimate, with this wonderful, almost tender wear and tear on the buildings, is something I would like everybody to see.
I just love Trastevere. You could go there and write a poem. If you haven't written a poem since you were in grade school, go to Trastevere and just sit on a corner and make a point to put your camera away and just be there. Have a glass of wine, find a little mom and pop restaurant. There's so many hole in the wall places. There's a touristy core, but if you walk a little farther away, you can find a magical slice of Rome.
Wandering here offers a chance to hone your senses, to see Rome more intimately. You'll discover a world of artisans who found their niche and love it. The people here, Trasteverini, are proud. Old-timers once bragged of never setting foot on the opposite side of the river. As we explore and observe, the big city seems worlds away. For maximum Trastevere fun and insight, I'm joined by my friend and Roman tour guide, Francesca Caruso. Especially here in Trastevere, you get this sense of the many layers of Rome.
Certainly, that is really the key to understanding Rome. This city, in its almost 3,000 years of history, was never abandoned. So people have just built on top and around of what was already there.
Like a layer cake, isn't it? Well, there's a beautiful roof garden.
Yeah. Now, most of us in Rome live in apartments, so no gardens, no backyards. So we all dream of the attico con terrazzo.
Attico con terrazzo, an attic with a terrace.
Yes, so the skyline of Rome is full of these little jungles on the rooftops.
Everything's so intimate. It's like we're walking through somebody's laundry room.
Well, we've always lived very close together here. Sharing space is really not a problem. We don't even have the word for privacy in Italian. We use the English word instead. We simply roll the R, so we say privacy.
Privacy. I know one more Italian word now.
Francesca, you've taught me a few words that are really nice. I wish my memory is better. Privacy, privacy. Hey, Francesca, I want to remind everybody who's watching, if you want a huge opportunity to sneak in and better understand Rome, Francesca writes an amazing blog, and she's got a website, her own little personal tour guide's website. It's easy to find. It's francescasname.com, francescacaruso.com. And I've just been reading some of the essays she's written, and I've been going there for all my life. And to read her essays is like you're walking with a friend who really knows a lot about what you're looking at. So if you love Rome and you want to love Rome more, check out francescacaruso.com. It's just beautiful. And you can have the luxury that I have of letting Francesca, showing you her hometown, the city she loves and she shares with such passion and artistry.
So why are so many of the oldest churches in Rome on this side of the river?
Because Trastevere was the neighborhood of foreigners, often Christian, who brought their faith with them.
I'm sorry to break into this, but I just, from a TV point of view, I was so excited with Francesca to go to this church that I really love, this little church of Saint Cecilia. And I thought we could go in with our camera and film me and Francesca talking, but the caretaker of the church said, no, you cannot, you can shoot video, but you can't shoot video of people talking in the church. So we had to shoot it in a way where it looks like we're talking to each other. And then we sat down on a bench outside of the church and we just interviewed Francesca, and we got the voiceover later and we put it with Francesca. So if you're the casual viewer, you'd think we're like talking right now with the camera rolling, but no, we're just walking. And later on, we did all of the on camera, but it's put together artfully like our crew knows how to do. And you wouldn't know that we weren't taping ourselves talking as we're in the church.
For the whole period of the persecutions, they could not build churches, so Mass would be celebrated in the homes of wealthy converts who offered their homes for Mass.
So then this is one of those kind of churches?
Yes, it was the house of Cecilia, and in later times they built a church dedicated to her.
And today the name of the church?
Is Santa Cecilia.
Now what happened to Saint Cecilia?
Saint Cecilia and her husband were killed because of their faith. The Romans tried to steam her to death for 3 days in her own home, and after that they beheaded her.
This is a beautiful statue. It's just peaceful.
Yes, it's very quiet. There's something very tender about it, and also very sad about a young woman who was killed so brutally for her faith.
The concept of a piazza serving as a community center goes back to ancient times. Piazza Santa Maria in Trastevere is the heart of this neighborhood. With its broad and inviting steps, the fountain was actually designed to be a kind of neighborhood sofa. Great part of exploring a neighborhood is just sitting on the main square.
Yeah, I think it's really in our DNA. We've been living in our piazzas as common living rooms since ancient Roman times. It's always been this way, and let's hope it will always be this way in the future, too.
And as usual, the district's main church fronts the main square. The Church of Santa Maria in Trastevere is also one of Rome's oldest and most beloved churches. Like Cecilia's church, it's built on the site of a 3rd century home where early Christians worshipped illegally. And like the city itself, it's been a work in progress, rebuilt continuously over the centuries. The portico is decorated with ancient fragments filled with early Christian symbolism. The anchor, birds, people with hands up praying as evangelical Christians do today. Many of these stones were originally lids to burial niches from the catacombs. Stepping inside takes you back centuries. The granite columns were scavenged from ancient Roman buildings. The church feels like an ancient hall of justice. That's because early churches adopted the pre-Christian basilica floor plan, a rectangular space divided by rows of columns. These mosaics are early medieval, well over 1,000 years old. They're rich in symbolism. Mary is given high stature. She's at the throne with Jesus in heaven. He has his arm around his mother, as if introducing her to us. Locals claim this is the first church dedicated to the Virgin Mary. I never leave without checking in with St. Anthony, who hangs out in the back. He's a favorite of the poor and is inundated with prayer requests on scraps of paper. In a nutshell.
And I'll tell you, when I go to next time to the Basilica of Santa Maria in Trastevere, I'm going to go to St. Anthony's statue, put a little scrap of paper with my prayer on it. And it's going to say, I just hope and pray that all the little moms and pops can survive this COVID pandemic. It's tough. It's tough for tour companies. It's tough for tour guides. It's tough for the little trattorias and the enotecas and the guest houses. It's tough for the little mom and pops and the creative adventures and the entrepreneurial dreams of hardworking people here in my own town that give it the character that I really appreciate. Let's hope that when we get through this COVID time, and we're going to get through it, we're on a glide path now to normalcy. There's no question about it. But let's hope that all of us really understand that we can shape the world that our children will inherit by how we consume and what our values are. Our values need to be true to how we consume. If we care about bookstores, we buy from bookstores. If we care about the little moms and pops, we help the little moms and pops. Francesca, you live in Rome. You know my passion for travel because of all the little dreams of people's businesses. Europeans are so good at finding their niche and doing it. Do you think the little moms and pops are going to survive COVID if it's another year before there's any business coming?
I wish I had an answer to that, honestly. I think that things are improving, but especially for what you're talking about, it's going to be really hard. I think as soon as it's possible to get back out there, we should all support each other and make sure that we can regain what we've lost.
Yeah. You're just, to me, you are just one of countless guides that are so passionate about sharing. And your vocation, your passion, your love is to teach your culture to people from other countries that come in, and you do it tirelessly, and you do it with love. And there's a lot of people just like you waiting for things to kick back into gear. So I'm so thankful we've got a government now that is taking this pandemic seriously, that we're embracing science, that we're going to be patient, that we're going to get over this. So let's just hope so, because I fully expect that within a year, we're going to be back in Rome with our groups, enjoying all the beauties we've just seen, and to a great extent, thanks to your help. Thank you, Francesca. Gabe, do we have any questions from our travelers?
Yes, so we have a lot of wonderful questions, and one great thing about this later showing is that we don't have another showing to finish by. So we are going to go a little bit long because there are some great questions. Before we get to those though, Rick, could we get our word from our sponsor for the week?
Another good thing about the second showing is I've been enjoying this wine now for almost 3 hours, and it just gets better and better.
So does my acqua frizzante.
Acqua frizzante. What's the word?
Leggermente. Lightly.
Leggermente. Vino rosso corposo, acqua frizzante leggermente.
Leggermente frizzante. Exactly.
There you go. Thank you very much. Hey, yes, a word from our sponsor. Rick Steves Europe is a gang of 100 travelers. Gabe, me, 98 others. We're holding it together. We've had no income for an entire year during COVID, but we are keeping our team together. We are 25% of our hours are dedicated to community service. We're putting in 400 hours a week in our community as a team, as neighbors. We're part of our community. All across our country, people are looking out for their neighbors. That's so important. We know we're going to come back together. The main way we are able to do our business is with our bus tours. And in 2019, we had our best year ever. We took 30,000 people on 1,200 different tours. This was our catalog for tours in 2020. We didn't take anybody on these tours this last year, but we've got the beautiful tours laid out here, 40 different itineraries, and we have our tours laid out for the fall of 2021 and the spring of 2022. We've got 18,000 people who have their names on the wait list to go on these tours as soon as we think it is safe and reliable and practical to throttle up. We're going to do it. We got our guides like Francesca standing by. We got our favorite hotels. We got our restaurants. We are ready to turn your travel dreams into smooth and affordable reality. But until then, we are just keeping our travel dreams alive. And we hope that you can be patient, and that when it is time to travel again, you'll know to go to ricksteves.com and check it out. Okay, Gabe, let's have some questions.
All right, so our first question is for Francesca. Francesca, we have a lot of people that would love to know, what has Rome been like for the past year without all of the tourists? Have there been any silver linings to that, kind of having the city to yourself? Could you paint us a picture, please?
Yes, I can paint you a picture. I think in the beginning, to see it so empty made all of us fall in love with it all over again, just to see all its beauty in that eerie silence. But it didn't last very long. And I think that we all felt that without people, even all of that beauty has a sort of desolate dimension. We're struggling. You know how much the Italians like to be together, how much we like to go out, hug, eat together, and all these things. So it's hard, but we're hanging in there. And the Romans are now walking around the city and taking tours. So hopefully they're getting to know their city better.
I've heard that it's interesting for you guys to go back to the squares that are so beloved, but it almost been abandoned because they were taken over by tourists, and now you can have the children playing on Piazza Navona again without all the tourists there.
It would be nice to have the children and the tourists. I think there's space for everybody in Rome. No, I mean,
Absolutely.
Rome is made for everybody. That's why it's so terrific.
Well, fortunately, Francesca, we also in the comments have many people that are eager to get back to Rome as soon as possible. And I have some questions from some of those people. The first is Cindy, for example, is wondering when she does plan her trip to Rome, what is the best time of year to go?
Cindy, thank you for this question. It used to be crowded, of course, when the weather was nicer, but I would absolutely try to avoid July and August because it's simply too hot and not as enjoyable. I am a big fan of Rome in October because I think it's the most beautiful month. There's something about the light that makes it extraordinary. But I would say spring, fall, and if you're willing to bundle up and put up with maybe a little bit of rain, the winter months have their fascination too. But spring and fall as opposed to the hot summer. Don't you think, Rick?
You know, Francesca, I've been in Rome in Christmas time and Easter time, and I love it. You just bundle up. I mean, the charm of Rome is there even in a gray winter day. The markets are thriving. The museums are wonderful. You can go to the Forum without the crowds and without the heat. And you're not likely to get a lot of rain. It's just going to be cold. On our staff, we had a big decision and we decided to redefine shoulder season. Shoulder season used to be May and September. Now we see it as April and October. You know, that's because May and September have become kind of peak season. So things are getting warmer with climate change and things are getting more crowded with the emergence of big economies in China and India and Russia and so on that are able to finally afford to travel. So the more we can go into the shoulder season, farther away from the peak of summer, I would say the better.
Another question is, do you have any advice, Matt is wondering this, for parents who would like to take their children to Rome? Any advice for traveling in Rome with children?
It's absolutely doable. I think you really have to pace yourself, though. I think you should limit the time of sightseeing to the main sites, and then allow times for a gelato, for a bike ride in the park, maybe going to the gladiator school. So I would say combining a little bit of sightseeing with the more relaxing, fun activities for the kids, of which there are several.
The gladiator school. I would never take my son to the gladiator school. He did some terrible ideas. We took our kids to Italy once and we did a vacation, just Venice and the Cinque Terre. That was wonderful for little kids. Venice and the Cinque Terre, the Riviera. Rome, yeah, of course you can do it with kids. But to me, Rome is a place. I like Rome for adults. I got to say, it's just, Rome is amazing to me. Okay, Gabe.
Well, I will say, Francesca, on my last tour that I assisted on, we went to the gladiator school. And it was nice to step into the ring with some of the kids on the tour. It was one of our family kids. I do have a question from Paul. So obviously Rome has a lot of kind of eternal and timeless sites that have been around for decades. What's new in Rome though? Maybe for somebody who hasn't been there in 5 or 10 years. What are some up and coming neighborhoods perhaps?
Well, you know, in the center, we hadn't had anything modern between the end of World War II and the mid-1990s, because after the end of World War II, they decided not to build anything modern again in the city center. So for modern neighborhoods, I wouldn't come to Rome for the modern, I have to say, but there's some fantastic walks that you can take to see the street art. There's fantastic street art happening in Rome right now in more peripheral areas that are pretty easy to reach with public transportation. So I would say street art and some of the more modern museums, the ones that you go to see for the museum structure, we have a couple of those.
You know, Francesca,
the Maxi.
The area of Testaccio, which is a very characteristic part of Rome, has a wonderful market, and you can take a food tour of Testaccio, which I've taken a lot of food tours. It's a perfect area for a food tour, and you'll see all that street art as you do it, and your guide will talk about the street art. It's wonderful. Also, remember, Francesca, you and I have done this, I think, the new sound and light shows in the Forum at night after dark. Are those still going? And that,
oh, yes.
Kids would love those because it really does amazing thing with laser lights and so on. Francesca, before we go any further, can you just talk a little bit about Roman cuisine? Because I've been enjoying I haven't even got to my classic one yet. I was sort of seduced by the other ones, but I'm going to just munch into this classic one, which was going to be just garlic and olive oil and salt and pepper, but then I had to put on my favorite cheese. How do we pronounce this Parmigiano Reggiano?
Parmigiano Reggiano. You said it perfectly.
I'm getting it. And
You're
you can
getting
just
it.
take the potato peeler on there. And this is my new candy. And then you got your basil, because you go to the store, and this is a cheap way to be sophisticated. You spend $4 and you buy your own basil plant. It's on your windowsill. And then whenever you've got guests coming over, you pick a few leaves and sprinkle it on your Parmigiano Reggiano, where you rubbed your garlic under your toast, and you've got yourself a fancy bruschetta. But tell me, Francesca, what is unique about Roman cuisine? What should we be tuned in when we go to Rome?
So Roman cuisine, I would define it as simple but very tasty. And there are three features that we can identify that make it a little bit peculiar. What's available? We always cook with what's available locally. So as far as meat goes, especially in the past, it was more, they had more sheep, goats, and pigs. And in the beginning, no beef practically. The second, and also vegetables, let's not forget the artichokes that are absolutely fundamental. Then the second feature, I would say, is the influence of the Jewish community that is the most ancient in Europe. So that influence is important. And the third one is actually very famous too. It's called the quinto quarto, which means the fifth quarter, the less precious cuts of meat. In the late 1890s, they opened.
Wait a minute. The less precious. You mean
I don't know how to say it.
You mean the
How do you say
disgusting
it?
cuts?
Yeah, all right. Yes, the
least
awful,
precious
as my mom
cuts of
calls it.
meat. Right.
Yes, I was trying to be elegant. Okay, so so they opened the slaughterhouse in the late 1890s. So beef makes its appearance in Roman cuisine, and the workers who worked at the slaughterhouse sometimes were paid with these less precious cuts of meat that they would then sell to the taverns and the eateries, who invented these very creative, very appealing ways in which to make tripe, for example, or hard or a tail. So I would say that it's a testament to how creative the Italians are in their cuisine, with very poor elements that maybe elsewhere might go to waste, that they can prepare them in interesting ways and they become the core of the cuisine. Not everybody has had money and has money for a steak and a fillet. So simple and tasty.
So you have money for the less special parts of the beef. The awful.
Yes.
What does your mom call it?
The awful, because like me, she's too much of a wimp to eat tripe. So
Right. All right. Oh, and there's
right.
there's one favorite pasta that I really like in Rome, cacio di pepe, right?
Cacio e pepe. For me, an ideal lunch or dinner would be cacio e pepe, which means very simply cheese and pepper. That's all it is, mainly of spaghetti. Then I would have a fried artichoke, and to conclude, I would have either a panna cotta, so a little vanilla pudding, maybe with a bit of chocolate sauce, or I would just get a gelato strolling around. But cacio e pepe or carbonara or absolutely Roman.
And a nice glass of agua frizzante.
Always.
Nice. Sounds good.
All right. Well, Rick and Francesca, we have time for one more question. And Francesca, the comments have been filled with just people saying how much they appreciate both your expertise and demeanor tonight. And just wondering what is the benefit of having a local guide when in Rome, and where do you find them? How can people get these local guides like you?
Well, I think the benefit of having a local guide in Rome is just because there's so much. So even to make choices, decide when it's convenient to go where, how much we can take in one day, because visual and sensory overload is an issue in a place like Rome. So somebody who can help design a day that won't be stressful, and which you can actually fall in love with the city. So I think guides really know how to do that. And where to find the local guides? Well, Rick Steve's guidebook is a good resource, but of course, even just the internet. If you just Google Rome guides, you'll find many great professionals who are very passionate about their jobs.
All right, Francesca, thank you very much. You know, I could talk all evening with Francesca, but I'd rather just be alone with the rest of my Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. So we're going to call it good here. I do want to remind people that next week it's music, favorite musical moments in Europe. And I've been practicing my piano, and I'm going to share a little bit about my favorite slices of European culture on the piano. And then after that, we're going to go to Great Wine. We're going to have a special leading up to St. Patrick's Day. And then we're going to be joined by Samantha Brown. So we have a lot of fun coming up on Monday night. It's Monday Night Travel. I want to thank Francesca Caruso for being with us and remind you that you can check out her blog. And if you go to ricksteves.com, you can go to the tours, you can go to the guides marketplace. And we have many great guides that have wonderful blogs, and Francesca's is right there along with the others. You can check that out. And I just want to say mille grazie, Francesco. You are really, really, I don't even know how to say, I don't want to minimize what I'm going to say by trying to fiddle around with Italian. I'm just going to say you are a magnificent guide, and it's wonderful for you to share your passion and love of Rome with all of us. So thank you very much, Francesca.
Thank you, Rick. It was a pleasure. And Rome is waiting for all of you. No.
All right. Ciao. We'll see you all next week.
Ciao.
And thank you
Ciao.
very much. Happy travels. Even if
Buonanotte.
you're just staying home for a little while.